What's up, Monarchs? Welcome back to our podcast with the WGEC titled #Equity is for Everyone. Today is our Sexual Assault Awareness Month episode, particularly talking about our very special event called Take Back the Night. And I am joined with our Assistant Director and ODU Confidential Victim Advocate, Ericka Harrison-Bey. So today we're just going to talk a little bit about what sexual assault awareness means, and also what anniversary of Take Back the Night is.
20th.
Oh,
big 20.
20th. So it's the 20th anniversary of Take Back the Night. So it's a big one. So we're just going to raise a little awareness about that as well. So I think first, starting with what is Sexual Assault Awareness Month. So the significance of it, the importance of honoring those survivors.
Yeah, so Sexual Assault Awareness Month takes place in April. Universities have been observing it pretty much since the late 90s, early 2000s. Excuse me. And just on that note, like you said, it's about raising awareness for sexual assault survivors on a college campus because unfortunately we know that it is something that will impact a majority of college students of all gender identities and sexualities, but particularly women aged 18 to 25. And so it is important that we set the expectation and the culture on our campus that we won't support sexual assault and violence on our campus, and also that people know that there are programs that raise awareness, that there's educational opportunities, that there are resources and support services to get connected to, so that in the unfortunate event someone does experience that type of interpersonal violence, they know that they are not alone, that there are places they can go to get that help, because one of the biggest downfalls of students who experience sexual assault outside of the very traumatic event in its own is that it causes a lot of students to drop out and not finish their degrees. And so we want to make sure that students are able to accomplish the goals they set out to do before this rupture to that journey occurs so that they can continue on.
Yeah. So yeah, of course, like honoring those victims, and that's also a little bit about what Take Back the Night is. It is, I know I went last year, that was my first time going, and there were like people told stories of like their experiences, and also like even a lot of our staff here, they have been through a lot. And I feel like that what makes them, that's what makes them right to do this line of work. Mm-hmm. So they also were able to share their stories as well. And I know you also have like a very particular background with this line of work. You are the confidential victim advocate, of course. So that's like majority of what you do on this campus is you are kind of the spokesperson for those victims. Mm-hmm. So do you want to share a little bit about your personal story and history?
Yeah. So, I mean, much like the statistic I shared, I've been impacted in different ways of my life in this particular form of interpersonal violence, but essentially getting my master's from ODU in the clinical mental health counseling program, I wanted to serve in the community setting to help initially just people impacted by domestic and dating violence, but that overlapped with sexual assault because that shows up in relationships where there is already violence occurring. And so to make a long story short, I have been doing that kind of work going on the better part of 8 years now. But really you could say the majority of my life it's been something I've been interested in advocating on behalf of, because like when we have gender-based violence in our communities, it's usually connected to a lot of other issues that people don't always think about, like financial abuse. Children are harmed by this, whether it's happening to them directly or to a parent or caregiver in their life. For young adults, it can set the trajectory for how they go on to pursue relationships beyond, their college years. And so for me, like, it is both something that has personally affected me, but also in my career, it's something I've done for, like I said, almost a decade now. And so I just learned a lot in those years by working with children, teenagers, adult survivors, and then, of course, being in the college setting. So, yeah, I mean, because of my background as a crisis and trauma-informed clinician in residency, I'm not fully licensed. I am provisionally licensed by the state, but that still allows me to be confidential in the same way that the Office of Counseling Services does. And so I always like to say while I do not provide the ongoing direct clinical counseling that you would get in that type of dynamic, I still have the same skills, the same background, the same ethical guidelines, and the same confidentiality.
So I think that's a question that we get a lot as an office, like the difference between your job and the Title IX office. So what's the difference between those services provided?
Yeah, and they are significantly different. So I want to make sure that I do spell that out because number one, they are not confidential. So that's going to be one of the biggest things, is that when you make a report to Title IX, they are aware of it from their case manager down to whoever's going to be investigating that or doing the support services for that case. And they also are obligated to maintain that information so that anybody else they need to reach out to, whether that's student outreach and support, housing and res life, your professors for your classes, they need to be able to disclose certain things. Not everything in the specifics of what's happening, but they obviously will have to share information. And so when it comes to me, it's kind of a two-piece approach. Yes, I'm confidential. Whatever you say does not have to leave the space. However, just like with counseling, if you are a threat to yourself, if you're threatening to harm someone else, or if you are a victim of a crime that occurred on campus, I do have to report that anonymously. I can do it anonymously. So what I mean is, let's just say, I'll use you as an example. If you were to tell me that something happened to you on the dorm and it was a drug-facilitated sexual assault, for example, that's a crime. You were the victim of a crime. I do have to report that as a campus security authority. That's what it's called. Does not sound fun, but that's what it is. I would have to report that, and I could just put either AJ or student was affected by X, Y, and Z. I would select the type of crime that it was, and then that goes off for reporting so that we know what's happening on our campus and we're not sweeping things under the rug. A lot of times, questions that I get more than anything is parents asking me, who's tracking this? How can I go online and see what's happening on campus? So that's where that information goes, right? It's like when they look up on ODU's campus, what crimes are happening, how many, they're not going to see your name. They're going to see that count in that statistical data so that people can make judgment calls on how safe they deem the campus to be.
So let's say like it happens to an ODU student and they're living outside of the campus, like an ODU housing or just housing like along, the Norfolk area. Do you still have to report it then, or is it only if it's physically like on campus?
There's a map. So there's a map that shows if it's on the sidewalk that's affiliated with ODU, or if it's on a building that's owned by ODU, or even something like we have like Tri-Cities buildings, right? So those are like Suffolk, Virginia Beach. Those would still count because they're ODU owned property. Okay. But for the most part, it's based on this geographical location. But if it's off of 21st Street or 38th or whatever, then like it would not technically have to be reported under the Clery Act, which is what I'm referring to. Okay. And so just to go back to the question, Title IX handles the investigations, they do mediation, they do the resolution, they work with the other party. So my ministry is working with the victims, right? The person directly impacted. Title IX gives equal representation, if you will, to the person not only impacted as the survivor or victim, but the person being named as the offender or perpetrator, or whatever language you want to use, so that there's due process. And that's not my job, right? I'm not looking for truth. I'm not adjudicating or giving any type of punishment to anyone. I'm simply here to be a resource navigator, to make sure people know the support services that they can take advantage of, and basically just to be like emotional support for the student.
So let's talk about Take Back the Night, which happens during Sexual Assault Awareness Month. And like we said before, that's also about raising awareness on our campus. But you specifically have been able to attend multiple Take Backs the Night because you are a two-time ODU alum. So that being said, could you explain a little bit of what that whole night kind of includes?
I would love to. So as was mentioned, 20-year anniversary for ODU. Yes. Ooh, let's clap it up. Take Back the Night has actually been going on. It started, I want to say, like 1973. So I'm not good at math, but I want to say we just passed like the 50-year observation of it.
Yeah. 50,
But
52.
yeah. Oh my God, it's 2025. Okay, so with that said, I have not been here since the beginning of ODU's Take Back the Night, but I was not that far after. So when I was in my undergrad was when I went to my first one. So that would have been like 2012 or 13. And I had no idea what it was at that time, like, period, right? Never heard of it, didn't even know why ODU was doing it. I was a commuter student, but I just so happened to be on campus that night for something. And it was massive. Like, there was so much stuff going on. And it was actually at night. So they had like stage lighting over the web. There were DJ tables. There was, just people everywhere. And at that time, I wasn't necessarily engaged in what the program was, but I remember just seeing a huge turnout. So fast forward to my graduate years. So this was pretty much like 2016 or 17. I was in my GA-ship, so I had been working with the Women's Center in my role, and they had a Take Back the Night that time. That was, they used to call it Big Blue Take Back the Night. So they would have Big Blue come out. The president would be there. That was, Broderick. And I'm not exaggerating when I say that there was like at least 200 plus people taking up all of Kaufman, all in front of the web. And it was just incredibly powerful because you always like to think that you're around good people and that people have similar values to you. But I think to see a display of that when, I don't know if it sounds like a big number, but I think sometimes we hear 200 and we can't really visualize what that looks like. But if you're actually in a sea of 200 plus people, it's overwhelming. Yeah. And they also did the Fear to Freedom kits that we still do.
Bags.
With like the cute little teddy bears and notes that go to survivors. Because when a person experiences a sexual assault and they go to the hospital, all of their clothing has to typically be collected for evidence. And so imagine you go through something traumatic like that, your clothes are then taken from you and you have nothing. So these bags give them, pants, shirt, couple items that can provide them some comfort, encouraging messages to remind them that, they're not alone in those moments. And seeing those be put together in the North Caf, literally, again, hundreds of students participating in that, just really moving. And I know that we can get there again. I know that pandemic did a number on folks. The panini made people not want to necessarily gather in large groups for some time. But, like I said, it's 2025 now.
I feel like we're past the pandemic. She's basically the flu now.
She's still a little more dangerous than the norovirus going around. That too.
But we do hope that everybody, as adults and college students, can be on top of their hygiene. Wash your hands, put a little mask on. Yeah. But when we gather in these huge numbers, we will all be aware of what's going on around us. And also, I do feel like, I say this kind of with majority of events, especially like our smaller ones. When it comes to events like these about like raising awareness, the number is the number. Like whoever comes. But I feel like no matter what, you're still like engaging and you're still sharing what needs to be shared. Because then that 5-6 people can go out and share it with their 5-6 friends each, and it keeps going and keeps going. So hopefully it could be big again. And this is the 20th anniversary. So
I want to say some things that I think will make it hopefully get back to, a little sliver of those numbers. But we are going to be doing something this year that really encompasses all the intersections of people impacted by this. And I think, a comment was made to me earlier, like, last year was intense. Hopefully this year can feel a little bit more welcoming.
Really?
And I would say that it will be, I hope, because we're going to have a keynote speaker this time who... her name is Alicia Weigel, and Alicia is an intersex individual who outwardly you would not guess that is her story, and she's done some really remarkable work with changing things on the legislative side. So I don't want to misrepresent, but I want to say she spoke either to Congress or in front of the Senate, one of those two bodies, to get them to change some of the laws that they've had around intersex identities and how that impacts folks doing a variety of things, whether it's related to gender affirming care and wellness, or when it comes to seeking supportive services on being victims of sexual assault or any other type of gender-based violence. So she is really someone I'm looking forward to having students listen to, because April is also our Pride Month observation on campus. So she'll be able to speak to a lot of different people's lived experiences and identities. I'm also trying to get one of our ODU students who is an opera singer to perform a song for us. Her mom works on campus. Like I said, she's a student. And when I say opera singer, I mean like girl really can blow. Like she's an opera singer, not like,
not just
you're
for
in the
funny
shower
games,
and you're like, because I think I can sing, but she can really sing. So I'm really hoping that she has, the time in her calendar to come out and sing us a little aria or something. And then we're going to, again, have our Fear to Freedom, because we know the students love the service learning opportunities, because they can count that on their hours for things.
Service, you could count this volunteer hours.
And once again, whoever brings the most students from their student org, whether they're Greek life or just in the set realm, $500.
I will say, I'm pretty sure Greek life usually takes the cake with that one.
I think they came close last year. I think it was actually SGA.
Oh.
So we like a little healthy competition because it's for a good cause, right? So yes, we want you to come out because you might get some coin and that can help you with things for your group. But also, the more numbers you have, the more you show that your group values standing in solidarity with survivors and sending the message that our culture, again, will not tolerate any type of harm. So it's a good thing.
So in terms of standing in solidarity with survivors, you, like you said before, like you've been in this line of work for quite some time. You've also just been involved with the idea of raising awareness for sexual assault and even like domestic violence, everything that encounters like gender-based violence. So as not only someone who advocates for them and someone who works with these individuals, just as a person yourself who's been around these situations, what advice or words of encouragement would you have to offer to listeners or students who are dealing with these struggles and these situations and kind of stuck in a place or battling on their own?
Yeah, I mean, so I could say a few things about that. I know, going back to the format of Take Back the Night, you kind of mentioned it, but one of my favorite parts, weird as it might sound to say, is the testimonies, because
that's my favorite too, though.
I mean, because we allow them to be anonymous, and we have students read them who are part of our empowered peer educators. So that way, we're not necessarily the traditional format is to invite students to speak to their personal testimonies, and while I love that as something that can be an incredibly empowering and cathartic or therapeutic tool, I also recognize that it is not easy to do that. That can be both, like I said, empowering, but also potentially triggering or re-traumatizing. And if you aren't in a space where you're well enough to do that in a large setting, we don't want to cause any harm to anyone, and we may not always be equipped to give them the appropriate immediate aftercare. So we've done the format, like I said, where we have our peer educators read the testimonies anonymously. But I say that because having your story be told, no matter what part of the journey you're on, can really be something that helps get that journey going, because a lot of people never tell anyone, ever. A lot of our data says that it takes survivors, especially male survivors of sexual assault, 20 years before they ever tell one person, let alone get help in therapy or peer support or anything. So just imagine, if you're on a campus and you experience something, whether it's on campus or wherever that is or took place, the isolation that you may feel, never telling anyone, never seeking support, makes the situation feel so much more definitive of who you are and what you've experienced, and also can make it feel like too big of a burden to ever work through. So to just kind of get back to the question, I don't like to give advice. Mm-hmm. It's one of the things drilled in our heads as therapists is like, we don't give advice because all I need is somebody to be like, you told me, and then you coming back.
I did it because of you.
And I don't need that, and you don't need that, and we don't, So I don't give advice, but I do like to just give suggestions or guidance. And as someone who has, like I said, done this work from ages of clients 5 years old, 4 years old, up to 70 in their 70s, let it out. If something happened to you and you're holding on to that shame and it's causing you to be blocked in your ability to speak about it, have either a trusted person that won't judge you or write it in a journal, but get it out, because in all honesty, the number one thing we have seen over and over in someone recovering from this, whatever you want to define that as, is that they told someone. And how that person responds sets the path forward. So I would say tell someone if and when you feel safe enough to, or even write it down. And then the other thing that sounds so cliche all the time, but it's very true, is like, it's not your fault. It's not your fault. I don't care if you were walking down the street butt naked as the day you were born. I don't care if you were under the influence. I don't care if it was, unfortunately, most of the time, somebody you knew, right? Dating partner, good friend, or even a family member, right? Just keeping it 100. It is not your fault. And those words, again, might sound cliche, but when we actually internalize it and recognize the truth in that statement, then it frees up so much of our bandwidth to be able to pursue whatever support looks like. Because if we want other people to believe us, we have to be able to believe ourselves that we were victimized. Not saying you have to hold on to the label or identity of victim, but being a victim of something that was the choice of another person to cause harm means that we should not shoulder the shame or embarrassment or whatever we might be feeling, which are very normal reactions. Our culture reinforces that. But just to boil it back down, tell someone or let it out in some way, and then remember that you are not to blame, you're not at fault. And then the last thing I would say is use the supports and resources available. We exist for a reason. Not everywhere is going to always be the most trauma-informed. Not everywhere is going to always have the most survivor-centered approach. And yet I can say on ODU's campus, I'm actually very glad that we do have an institutional culture that believes victims and survivors. The people that are in these roles do their best. We do come from a place of really wanting to help. And so when you have those things working together with, a student who's motivated to seek justice, to seek healing, then we can really accomplish something in this time that we have together to get them on that trajectory, which will not be an overnight thing. It won't even necessarily be an easy thing. But I think when students know there are supports in place, there are resources, and they trust that those systems will work, then it's like you get out of it what you put in. If you utilize it, we will do everything we can for you, and at least try to plant those seeds so that when you go on from this time in your life, yes, that will be a part of your story. It's not something I ever tell people you're supposed to just get over and move on from, but you can move through it. You can integrate it into your story so that it doesn't define you, but it's just another chapter in your book.
Yeah. And I think especially, even if you haven't experienced this yourself, or people who have experienced this, and you're just trying to be just there to listen, mm-hmm. and to as support, I feel like one thing that really stuck with me, if you watched our DVAM podcast, you said, domestic violence doesn't discriminate age, gender, anything like that. And your experience personally, you didn't know that woman could be the perpetrator, woman could be the abusers. Mm-hmm. So that's the same thing with sexual assault. It doesn't discriminate for anyone, anything. And like you said, even 5 to 70. Like, that's a crazy range of numbers, but it's very real. Even younger, there's babies who have experienced this, you know?
Mm-hmm.
So I think as someone who's just trying to be a support system for someone going through this, be exactly that. Like, be there for that person. You don't have to give them advice. You don't have to, you don't have to be the solution.
Mm-hmm.
All you have to do is listen.
Yes.
And I feel like that's why Take Back the Night is important, because it's not only for those survivors, it's for everyone who is in agreement that this is a situation that should not be happening but is. And no matter who, where, what, like that person should be supported.
Yeah.
So definitely, if you can and if you are able, I would highly recommend coming to Take Back the Night. Last year was my first one that I went to, being on this campus. And honestly, it was very eye-opening. And like you said, the stories that were read, I feel like those were my favorite part, because you got to hear different versions. You got to hear these different groups of people that have experienced this. Also, there were like kids there, and it was just so like welcoming and inviting. The weather was not on our side, but hopefully it will be this year.
Yeah. April, it's so funny you say that.
Mayflowers to April
like
show,
one
something
year,
like that.
it was like wildly hot and the sun was just like in everybody's eyes, and then last year it was really cold and we were like, oh,
A little rain.
yeah. But I do want to go back really quickly. I loved you just summarizing about even if you're not directly impacted, it is not only for survivors. It's really to show again like how you can support survivors. And so I just want to make sure I say, if you are that person that someone discloses what happened to them, like I said earlier, the data shows how that initial person responds kind of sets the tone for what the survivor does from there on out. So you do not have to have the answers. You don't have to make judgments. You don't have to know what to say, right? It's about being there for that person. And as hard as it can be, because depending on our relationship, we might be really upset. We want to know, like, what happened? Who did this
to you?
That is not always helpful in that moment to the survivor, right? Because they may not know who did it, or they may know and they don't want to tell you. And that's okay if they don't share every detail. It is so important to just do two things. Listen with, be empathetic and show them compassion.
Yeah.
That's it. You don't have to do nothing else unless they ask you or you feel you're in a position to. But truly believing them, listening to them, and showing them that compassion. Again, no matter the age group, what the circumstance was, that is what makes so much of the difference. And if nothing else that you take from this conversation is just to do that at the very least.
So our Take Back the Night event, April 2nd?
Yes, it's April 2nd.
So April 2nd.
4:30 to 8.
Yes. So if you would like to join us in standing, what's the word?
In solidarity.
Yes. Standing in solidarity with survivors, or just being there for anyone or any reason. Or if you're just walking by and you see this big group of people, it's us. Join us. Listen. Enjoy the activities and learn how to be.
And there will be food.
Oh, ooh, that's my favorite part.
Food.
And there'll be food. And I feel like food always gets the college students in.
Gets the people going.
So, volunteer hours, food, community, awareness.
$500 prize if you bring the most people with your student org or fraternity or sorority.
Money. Okay? So, definitely stop by. And yeah, I hope you guys all enjoyed this podcast. Ericka, thank you so much for joining us again for another episode. I love having Ericka on the episodes because even though she is my boss, guys, like the vibe is great and she's like so well informed about all these situations. It is her job, but she does it well. And I feel like it's not just her job, like it's who she is.
Passion.
So, thank you guys so much for watching. Thank you for joining me, and we will see you next time.